Congratulations on another record quarter, everyone. David's voice boomed across our company's sleek conference room as champagne flutes clinked against each other. His confident smile reached everyone except me. I watched from the corner as he basked in the adoration of our employees, our family, as we'd always called them. 35 dedicated souls who had no idea their CEO had just emptied our joint savings account of $2.3 million. None of this would be possible without my incredible team, he continued, raising his glass higher, and especially without my brilliant wife and CFO, Elizabeth. All eyes turned to me. I maintained the practiced smile I'd perfected over 15 years of marriage, nodding appreciatively as our employees applauded. The same smile I'd worn this morning when I discovered the transfer notification from our bank. The same smile I'd maintained during my quiet call to our financial advisor while locked in my private bathroom. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. To Breakthrough Solutions' continued success, I said, raising my glass. My voice didn't waver. Nothing in my expression betrayed the hurricane raging inside me. If David noticed my eyes didn't match my smile, he didn't show it. But then, he hadn't noticed much about me lately. Not my new haircut, not my questions about his late nights, and certainly not my quiet conversations with our corporate attorneys over the past month as my suspicions grew. We're projecting 20% growth next quarter, he announced proudly to more applause. 20% growth he'll use to fund his betrayal, I thought, taking a small sip of champagne. The bubbles felt like acid as I swallowed. The discovery had been almost accidental. A forgotten phone on our kitchen counter. A notification that flashed across the screen before it went dark. A name I didn't recognize. Amber. The message preview just visible enough. Can't wait to see our new place. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I'd become a silent detective. In my own marriage, gathering evidence with the same methodical precision I'd used to build our company's financial structure over the past decade. Elizabeth is too modest to brag, David continued, wrapping his arm around my waist possessively. But her financial wizardry is why we're all standing here celebrating today. His cologne, different from his usual, made my stomach turn. It was subtle, something most wouldn't notice. But I wasn't most people. I was the woman who had helped him build this company from our garage, who had secured our first major investors, who had structured every contract and financial vehicle that turned our small tech startup into the $50 million business it was today. And I was the woman who had discovered that my husband had been planning his exit from our marriage and with our money for nearly 6 months. Speech. Called Marcus from sales, his enthusiasm infectious enough that others joined in. David looked at me expectantly, his blue eyes showing nothing but pride and love to anyone who didn't know where to look for the lies. I'd become an expert at finding them. I'll keep this brief, I said, stepping away from David's arm. Success isn't just about brilliant ideas or market timing. It's about patience, about careful planning, about understanding exactly who controls what and when to make your move. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A few confused glances exchanged around the room. This wasn't my usual upbeat financial outlook. But David laughed, assuming I was talking about market strategy. That's my Elizabeth. Always thinking 3 steps ahead, he said, squeezing my shoulder. 4 steps, actually, I thought, remembering the meeting I'd had earlier that day with our corporate counsel, Jack Harmon. Everything's in place, he'd confirmed quietly, sliding a folder across his desk. Just say the word. The celebration continued around us. I circulated through the room, accepting congratulations, discussing upcoming projects, asking about spouses and children. Business as usual. No one would know from looking at me that I had discovered David had purchased a $1.8 million beach house in Malibu under an LLC the previous month. A house I'd never seen, never been invited to. A house where he'd been photographed by my private investigator with a woman 20 years his junior, an aspiring actress named Amber Sullivan. "We should wrap this up," David whispered in my ear, around noon. "I have that business meeting in Palo Alto." His business meeting was actually a 3 p.m. reservation at the Clement Hotel, the same hotel where he'd been meeting Amber every Thursday for the past 4 months, according to the investigator's detailed reports. "Of course," I replied, checking my watch. "I have that call with Singapore anyway." Another lie between us. There was no call with Singapore. Instead, I had a 2-hour p.m. appointment with our bank's forensic accounting team to trace exactly where our $2.3 million had gone. Although I already knew the answer, I watched David work the room, shaking hands, accepting backslaps from the executives who thought he was a visionary. In many ways, he was. David could see market opportunities others missed. He could charm investors and close impossible deals. What he couldn't see was that his carefully constructed escape plan had one fatal flaw. He'd forgotten who really controlled Breakthrough Solutions. The company had been my idea originally. A software platform that streamlined supply chain logistics wasn't sexy or exciting, but I'd recognized its potential value after years working as a logistics consultant. David had been the one to build the prototype, the charming front man who could turn my technical specifications into investor enthusiasm. The perfect partnership, his charisma, my detail-oriented planning. When we'd structured the company, we'd done something unusual, something David had long forgotten. While he held the CEO title and was the public face of the company, the controlling interest was actually mine, 51% to his 49%. It had been a practical decision at the time, a tax and liability strategy recommended by our first attorney. Over the years, with David as the charismatic leader everyone associated with our success, he'd seemingly forgotten that small but crucial detail. "We should have dinner tonight to celebrate privately," David said as the party wound down, his hand resting on the small of my back. "That new French place in Hayes Valley? The same restaurant where he'd taken Amber 3 weeks ago, according to my investigator's photos. The irony was almost too much. "I'd love that," I lied smoothly. "I'll meet you there? Around 7? "Perfect," he replied, kissing my cheek, his eyes already distant, probably calculating how quickly he could get to his Palo Alto meeting with the money he'd stolen from our life together. I watched him leave through the glass doors of our headquarters, waited exactly 15 minutes, then walked calmly to my office and closed the door. My assistant Miranda knew not to disturb me during my post-celebration reflection time. It was a ritual I'd established years ago, 30 minutes alone after every company milestone to center myself before moving forward. Today, it would serve a different purpose. I opened my laptop and typed a single email to Jack Harmon. "Initiate Protocol Lighthouse." His response came seconds later. "Understood. All systems go for 9 a.m. tomorrow." With trembling fingers, I opened my bottom desk drawer and removed the manila envelope my private investigator had delivered yesterday. Inside were dozens of photographs. David and Amber entering hotels, dining at exclusive restaurants, shopping for furniture that I now realized was for their Malibu beach house. The final photos showed them at a bank, taken yesterday, the same. Day 2.3 million had vanished from our joint account. I tucked the envelope into my briefcase, straightened my desk, and touched up my makeup in the small mirror I kept in my purse. Outside my office window, San Francisco's financial district gleamed in the afternoon sun. 10 years we'd worked to afford these views. 10 years of missed vacations, postponed children, sacrificed friendships, all to build something lasting. Together. And now he was throwing it all away for a woman who'd been in high school when we founded this company. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Running late. Meet at 7:30 instead? More time with Amber, I suspected. I replied, "No problem, see you then." I had my own plans for the next few hours. The offices of Walton, Harmon, and Chen occupied the entire 34th floor of a downtown high-rise. As I stepped out of the elevator, Jack's assistant immediately stood. "Mrs. Porter, they're ready for you in the main conference room." "Thank you, Denise. And remember, Mr. Porter hasn't scheduled any appointments with the firm," she finished, with a knowing nod. Jack had hired her specifically for her discretion. Inside the conference room, 4 people waited. Jack Harmon, our corporate attorney, Maya Chen, our intellectual property specialist, Susan Walton, the founding partner who specialized in high-asset divorces, and Robert Jenkins, our head of corporate security who had flown in from our Boston office. "Everything's happening exactly as you predicted," Jack said, sliding a folder across the table. "The money was transferred to an account at Pacific Western Bank yesterday, then immediately wired to an LLC called Coastal Horizons." "The LLC that owns the Malibu property," I confirmed. "Exactly," Susan said, "which constitutes clear misappropriation of marital assets." "What about the company transfer?" I asked, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. Robert spoke up, his Boston accent thickening as it always did when he was concerned. "He attempted to move significant company intellectual property to private servers this morning, just as you warned he might." "But he couldn't," Maya added with a small satisfied smile. "The protocol changes you implemented last month prevented it. He received an access denied message, but our monitoring system logged the attempt." I nodded, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. David's betrayal was even more extensive than I'd feared. It wasn't just our marriage he was abandoning. He was trying to steal company assets as well. The forensic accountant identified 3 additional accounts David has opened in the past 6 months, Jack continued, all funded with what appeared to be diverted consulting fees that should have gone to the company. "How much?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Approximately $800,000. I closed my eyes briefly. Almost $1 million on top of our emptied savings. The money itself wasn't the point. We were wealthy enough that even these amounts wouldn't ruin me financially. It was the calculation, the premeditation, the sheer coldness of it. "We've prepared everything as discussed," Jack said gently. "Operation Lighthouse is ready to launch at your command. But Elizabeth, are you absolutely certain? Once we begin, there's no turning back." Was I certain? I thought about the 15 years David and I had shared, the nights we'd stayed up, dreaming about the company's future, the Christmas mornings and anniversary celebrations, the way he'd held my hand at my father's funeral 4 years ago. Then I thought about the beach house I'd never seen, the money stolen from our shared life, the intellectual property he'd tried to take, the young woman waiting for him in a hotel at this very moment. "I'm certain," I said, opening my eyes. "Begin at 9 a.m. tomorrow as planned. I'll handle David. Tonight." Susan looked concerned. "Are you sure you want to confront him personally? Given what we know, his reaction could be unpredictable." I smiled without humor. "David has always been predictable to me. That's why we're all sitting here now. Besides," I added, "I need to see his face when he realizes what's happening. I need that closure." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd known David and me since the beginning, had drafted our first business plan on his dining room table when we couldn't afford proper legal fees. "We'll be standing by if you need anything," he promised. "The security team will have eyes on the restaurant, and Robert has arranged for a private security detail to monitor your home tonight." "Thank you all," I said, standing and smoothing my skirt. "I should go prepare for dinner." As I turned to leave, Robert spoke up again. "Elizabeth, he's not the man you thought he was. Be careful." I paused at the door. "No, Robert. He's exactly the man I thought he was these past 6 months. I just refused to see it until now." The French restaurant David had chosen was deliberately intimate, soft lighting, well-spaced tables, discreet service. Perfect for romantic dinners, business discussions, or difficult conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early, composed and prepared. Mrs. Porter, the maitre d', greeted me warmly. Your husband called to say he's running slightly behind schedule. Would you like to be seated or wait at the bar? The table, please, I replied. I needed the strategic advantage of being settled when David arrived. I ordered a sparkling water and reviewed the mental script I'd prepared. When David finally arrived at 7:45, his hair slightly damp from a recent shower, I knew he'd come straight from Amber. I'm so sorry, he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Traffic was a nightmare. Another lie. My investigator had confirmed that the Clement Hotel was only a 30-minute drive from the restaurant at this hour. He'd simply stayed with her longer than planned. No problem, I said, smiling the same practiced smile I'd worn at the office celebration. How was your meeting in Palo Alto? Productive, he replied, studying the wine list. Very promising connection for that healthcare expansion. We've been discussing. I watched him order an expensive Bordeaux with practiced charm, complimenting the sommelier's knowledge. This was the David everyone saw. Confident, charismatic, utterly in control. He'd always been an excellent performer. 15 years, I said when the sommelier left. David looked up, his expression softening. Has it really been that long since we started the company? Since we got married, I corrected him. Though the company anniversary isn't far behind. Right. Of course, he said quickly. Best 15 years of my life. I held his gaze steadily. Really? Better than the life you're planning in Malibu with Amber? The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. The sommelier chose that precise moment to return with the wine, going through the ritual of presentation and tasting while David struggled to compose himself. I smiled politely, thanked the server, and waited until we were alone again. Elizabeth, I can explain. The $2.3 million you transferred from our savings? The beach house purchased under Coastal Horizons LLC? The diverted consulting fees? The company intellectual property you tried to transfer this morning? I took a sip of wine. Which part needs explanation, David? His shock gave way to calculation. I could see it in his eyes. The rapid assessment of what I knew, what I could prove, what his best move might be. It was the same expression he wore when negotiating difficult contracts. You've been spying on me, he finally said, his voice low, with anger. I've been protecting myself, I corrected. There's a difference. This isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been planning your exit for months. You've been systematically moving assets. You've been stealing from me and from the company we built together. I leaned forward slightly. What I don't understand is why you thought you'd get away with it. His expression changed then, hardened into something I'd rarely seen during our marriage, the mask slipping to reveal something colder beneath. You don't understand, because you've never really understood me. Elizabeth? You think I'm content being the idea guy while you control everything from behind the scenes? You think I don't know how you and the board talk about me, the charismatic frontman who needs to be managed? I blinked, genuinely surprised. Is that what this is about? Your ego? It's about 15 years of being treated like your puppet, he hissed, keeping his voice low despite his obvious rage. 15 years of building something extraordinary only to have you control every aspect of it, and me. So your solution was to steal our money and run away with a woman half your age? I kept my voice even, though my heart was pounding. That's not a midlife crisis, David. That's criminal behavior. He leaned back, a smirk replacing his anger. It was an expression I'd never seen directed at me before, and it chilled me to the core. Criminal? Prove it. The money came from our joint account. I had every legal right to move it. The consulting fees were negotiated by me personally. The clients will back that up. As for the intellectual property, his smirk widened. I'm the CEO. I have authority to move company assets as I see fit. You forgot something important, I said quietly. What's that? I own 51% of Breakthrough Solutions. You own 49. For the second time that evening, the color drained from his face. It had been years since we'd discussed our ownership structure. In the day-to-day operations, it rarely mattered. David led, I supported. The public saw him as the visionary. I worked behind the scenes. But legally, crucially, I controlled the company. That was a temporary arrangement, he said finally. For tax purposes when we started. It was never changed, I replied. You signed the original operating agreement, and every amendment since. The ownership structure remains exactly as it was established. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. The mental review of documents signed years ago, arrangements made and then forgotten in the blur of building a successful company. The board will never support you over me, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm the face of Breakthrough. I'm the one who brings in the big clients, who speaks at the conferences, who everyone associates with our success. The board, I said calmly, has already been briefed on your misappropriation of company funds and attempt to steal intellectual property. They're meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to formalize your removal as CEO. David's hand tightened around his wine glass so severely I thought it might shatter. You can't do this. I already have. What about our marriage? He asked, his voice suddenly softer, his eyes taking on the wounded expression that had worked on me so many times before. 15 years, Elizabeth. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me, I said, feeling the first crack in my composure. Until I saw the photos of you and Amber. Until I discovered the house you bought for her with our money. Until I realized you were planning to leave me with nothing, while you started a new life. That's not— Stop lying, I said, my voice finally betraying a hint of the pain I'd been suppressing. I have the evidence, David. All of it. The photos, the bank transfers, the property records, the attempted intellectual property theft, the security footage from hotels, every lie you've told me for the past 6 months. He stared at me for a long moment, then something in his demeanor shifted. The pretense fell away completely, revealing a man I didn't recognize. You always were too smart for your own good, he said coldly. Fine. Yes, I was leaving. Yes, I took the money. Money I earned, by the way, while you hid in your office with spreadsheets. And yes, Amber and I are planning a life together. A life where I'm not controlled by my wife's majority ownership or subjected to her constant scrutiny. Each word was like a physical blow, but I maintained my composure. And the company assets you tried to steal? He shrugged. Insurance, leverage. I built that technology as much as anyone. With company resources, under company contracts. It's theft, David. It's business, he countered. And this conversation is over. He stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. Keep the company if it means that much to you. Keep your controlling interest and your precious board approval. Amber and I have enough to start over somewhere else. With my money, I said. His smile was cruel now, without a trace of the man I'd loved for 15 years. Consider it the price of your freedom. Enjoy running the company alone, Elizabeth. We both know it's all you've ever really cared about anyway. As he turned to walk away, I spoke one last time. David. He paused, looking back with impatience. The $2.3 million you transferred yesterday, it's already been frozen by court order, as have all accounts associated with Coastal Horizons LLC. The Malibu property has a temporary lien pending investigation of fraud, and Amber Sullivan was served with a deposition notice approximately— I checked my watch, 30 minutes ago. The shock on his face was almost worth every moment of pain I'd endured. You didn't just forget who controlled the company, David. You forgot who handled all our financial arrangements, who structured every account, Who maintained relationships with every banker and financial advisor we've ever used? I stood up, placing my napkin neatly on the table. You forgot that I see everything. I walked past him, pausing at his side just long enough to whisper, Enjoy explaining to Amber why your promises of a lavish new life together have suddenly evaporated. The dinner's on your personal credit card, the only account I haven't frozen. Yet, I suggest you enjoy the wine. It might be the last expensive thing you taste for quite some time. As I walked out of the restaurant into the cool San Francisco evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. All systems confirmed for 9 a.m. Security detail in place at your home. Call if you need anything. I took a deep breath of the salt-tinged air, feeling a strange mixture of devastation and liberation. Tomorrow would bring the formal end of David's role at Breakthrough Solutions. The coming weeks would bring the end of our marriage. The life I'd planned had shattered, but I wasn't the one left standing in the ruins. Because unlike David, I had remembered the most important lesson in business and in life. Always know exactly where you stand and where the exits are located. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in our guest bedroom. I couldn't bear to sleep in the bed we'd shared for 15 years, listening to the sounds of the security team positioned discreetly around our Pacific Heights home. David hadn't returned. According to the updates, from Robert's team, he'd checked into the St. Regis after leaving the restaurant alone. At 5:30 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. Standing under the shower's hot spray, I tried to wash away the remnants of yesterday's confrontation. David's words echoed in my mind. You think I'm content being the idea guy while you control everything from behind the scenes? Had I really been controlling? Had I somehow pushed him into betrayal? The doubts crept in despite the mountain of evidence showing his calculated deception. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. A text from Jack. Car will pick you up at 7:30. Everything in place. I dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal Armani suit that had always made me feel powerful, paired with the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me. Wore armor of a sort. The woman in the mirror looked composed, professional, ready for battle. Only the slight shadows under her eyes betrayed any hint of inner turmoil. The security detail escorted me to the waiting town car, scanning the quiet street with practiced vigilance. Inside the vehicle, Robert waited with a tablet displaying multiple screens of information. Morning brief, he said without preamble. David checked out of the St. Regis at 6:15 a.m. He's currently at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. Amber Sullivan was seen entering the same establishment 10 minutes ago. I nodded, unsurprised. He's bringing her to the office. Robert raised an eyebrow. You predicted that? He's planning a show of defiance, I explained. David believes in controlling the narrative. Right now, he thinks he's lost the money but can still salvage his position at the company if he moves quickly. He'll try to paint me as the vindictive wife using personal issues to interfere with business. Bold strategy, Robert muttered. It would be if the board didn't already have evidence of his financial misconduct. I checked my watch. What about the system lockdown? Complete. As of 5:00 a.m., all access codes have been updated. His credentials will fail when he attempts to enter the building or log into any company system. I nodded, staring out at the city coming to life in the early morning light. San Francisco looked peaceful, unaware of the corporate drama about to unfold in one of its gleaming towers. The press? I asked. Contained, for now. No leaks. And the employees? All key personnel have been notified to attend an emergency meeting at 9:30 a.m. They haven't been told why. The car pulled into the private garage beneath our headquarters, bypassing the main entrance where David would likely try to make his entrance. Avoidance wasn't the goal. Confrontation was inevitable. But I needed to be positioned properly when it happened. Jack and Maya waited by the private elevator that connected directly to the executive floor. Their expressions were professionally neutral, but I could see the concern in their eyes. The board is already assembled in the main conference room, Jack said, handing me a leather portfolio. Final paperwork is inside, ready for signatures. Security. Footage confirms David and Ms. Sullivan are approaching the building, Maya added, checking her phone. ETA approximately 7 minutes. The elevator ascended silently. I used those moments to center myself, to push away the personal heartbreak and focus on the business at hand. Today wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about protecting the company we'd built, the employees who depended on us, and the clients who trusted us. The executive floor was unusually quiet. Most of the staff wouldn't arrive for another hour, but the lights in the main conference room spilled into the hallway. Inside, 9 people sat around the polished table, our 7-member board of directors, our chief technology officer Sam, Wilson, and Susan Walton. Elizabeth, Martin Chen, our chairman, stood as I entered. The silver-haired venture capitalist had been our first major investor and had served as board chair since we went public 3 years ago. We're deeply disturbed by the evidence presented yesterday. I understand, I said, taking my seat at the table. And I appreciate your willingness to address this matter so quickly. Martin nodded gravely. The attempted transfer of intellectual property alone would warrant immediate action. Combined with the financial improprieties, he shook his head. The board is unanimous in its decision. I glanced around the table. These people had known David and me for years. Some had been with us since the beginning. All looked solemn but resolute. You should know, I said carefully, that David will likely arrive shortly with Amber Sullivan, the woman he's been involved with. He'll attempt to frame this as a personal vendetta on my part. Olivia Reyes, our newest board member and the former CTO of a Fortune 500 company, leaned forward. We're not concerned with your personal relationship, Elizabeth. We're concerned with the documented evidence of corporate malfeasance. The attempted intellectual property theft alone violates at least 6 clauses in his employment contract. She's right, Jack confirmed. The case for termination is ironclad. My phone buzzed with a text from security. D. Porter and female companion attempting to enter main lobby. Access denied as instructed. I showed the message to Jack, who nodded. Right on schedule. He'll use his override code next, I predicted. When that fails, he'll call someone on the executive team. Sure enough, my phone rang seconds later. Sam's phone rang simultaneously, David trying multiple channels. We both declined the calls. Let's proceed, Martin said firmly. The resolution. Before the board is to terminate David Porter as Chief Executive Officer of Breakthrough Solutions, effective immediately, for cause. The formal vote took less than 2 minutes. Unanimous. I'll need to sign the SEC disclosures immediately, I said, opening the portfolio Jack had given me. We're required to notify them of a material change in executive leadership within 4 hours. As I signed the necessary documents, Robert entered the room. Ms. Porter, Mr. Porter is now demanding access to the building. He's becoming insistent with security. Video feed to the main screen, please, I requested. The large display on the conference room wall flickered to life, showing the lobby security cameras. David stood at the reception desk, his face flushed with anger. Beside him, a young woman with long blonde hair, Amber, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Security personnel maintained a professional distance, but their stance was alert. He's claiming his access was revoked by mistake, Robert reported, listening to his earpiece. He's threatening to call the police. On what grounds? Susan asked, incredulous. Being locked out of his own company, apparently. I checked the time. 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes ahead of schedule. Tell security to inform Mr. Porter that a board meeting is in progress and he's welcome to wait in the visitor's lounge. A representative will be down shortly. Robert relayed the message. On the screen, we watched David's expression darken as he received the news. Who will speak with him? Martin asked. I will, I said, standing, along with Jack and security. Elizabeth, Susan cautioned. Given the personal nature? This isn't personal, I interrupted, though we all knew that was only partially true. As majority shareholder and now acting CEO, I'm the appropriate person to deliver the board's decision. No one argued further. As I gathered my materials, Martin added, "We've already approved your appointment as interim CEO while the search committee identifies candidates, unless, of course, you wish to assume the role permanently." The offer surprised me. I'd always been content working behind the scenes, focusing on strategy and finances while David handled the public-facing aspects of leadership. "Let's discuss that after we've handled the immediate situation," I suggested. Jack, Robert, and I took the main elevator down to the lobby. During the descent, Jack reviewed the key points. "Remember, keep it strictly business. The termination is for documented corporate malfeasance. No mention of personal matters unless he introduces them first." The elevator doors opened, revealing the lobby's soaring glass ceiling and modern decor. David paced near the security desk, while Amber sat stiffly on one of the minimalist couches. When David saw me, his expression hardened. "Elizabeth," he said, striding toward us. "What the hell is going on? My access has been revoked." "Mr. Porter," Jack interjected smoothly, "I think it's best if we move this conversation to a private area." "I don't need privacy in my own company," David snapped. "I need my access restored immediately. We have clients waiting, deals pending." "David," I said quietly, "the visitors' conference room. Now." Something in my tone made him pause. His eyes narrowed as he studied my expression, then darted to Jack and Robert. Calculation replaced anger as he realized this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. "Fine," he said tightly. "Amber, wait here." The young woman looked relieved to be excluded. Inside the small conference room, David didn't bother sitting down. "Whatever this is, Elizabeth, it's gone far enough. Freezing our accounts was one thing, but interfering with company operations crosses a line." "Please sit down," I said, placing my portfolio on the table. "I'll stand." Jack cleared his throat. "Mr. Porter, as legal counsel for Breakthrough Solutions, I must inform you that the board of directors has voted unanimously to terminate your employment as chief executive officer, effective immediately, for cause." The blood drained from David's face, but he recovered quickly. "This is absurd. The board can't terminate me without—" "The board has all necessary authority," Jack continued impassively. "The termination is based on documented evidence of financial misconduct and attempted theft of company intellectual property." "This is about us," David said, turning to me. "You're using your position to punish me for personal reasons." "The board reviewed extensive evidence," I replied, keeping my voice level, "including your attempt to transfer proprietary code to external servers, your diversion of consulting fees to personal accounts, and your misuse of company resources." "You've been building a case against me," he accused, "planning this for months." "Actually," I said, "I only discovered your betrayal 3 weeks ago. You've been planning yours for at least 6 months. The difference is your plans were criminal. Mine were protective." David laughed bitterly. "Always so righteous, Elizabeth. So perfect. Did you tell the board how you've controlled every aspect of this company? How you've second-guessed every decision I've made? How you've undermined me with the executive team?" Jack stepped forward. "Mr. Porter, this line of argument isn't productive. The board's decision is final." "The hell it is." David slammed his hand on the table. "I built this company. I'm the reason we have clients. I'm the one who closes the deals, who speaks at the conferences, who everyone associates with our success. With resources you've now attempted to steal," I pointed out calmly. "With money you've diverted from our joint accounts and company coffers. With intellectual property you tried to transfer out of our secure servers just yesterday." His jaw tightened. "I have rights. I own 49% of this company. And as such, you're still a significant shareholder," Jack acknowledged. "But your employment has been terminated. Your access to company systems, facilities, and resources has been revoked. You're required to surrender any company property in your possession, including your laptop, phone, and identification, David stared at me, his blue eyes cold with fury and something else. Shock, perhaps, that his carefully constructed plans had collapsed so completely. I want to address the board, he demanded. The board has made its decision, I said. But you're welcome to send any written communication through counsel. Now, please, surrender your company property. And if I refuse, Robert stepped forward slightly, then we'll be forced to involve law enforcement, sir. The company property in your possession contains proprietary information protected by numerous confidentiality agreements and federal statutes. David looked from Robert to Jack to me, seemingly searching for any weakness, any opening. Finding none, he slowly reached into his pocket and withdrew his company phone and ID badge, placing them on the table with exaggerated care. My laptop is in my car, he said stiffly. Security will accompany you to retrieve it, Robert replied. This isn't over, Elizabeth, David said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You think you've won? You've just declared war. No, David, I corrected him. You declared war when you emptied our accounts, purchased a house for your girlfriend with our money, and tried to steal company assets. This isn't a victory for me. It's the consequence of your actions. His laugh was ugly, bitter. Always the victim. Poor Elizabeth, betrayed by her husband. Will that be the story you tell the press, our clients, our friends? The story I'll tell, I said evenly, is that our former CEO was terminated for documented financial misconduct and attempted theft of intellectual property. Any personal matters between us will remain private, unless you choose to make them public. David's eyes flickered with uncertainty for the first time. He'd expected tears, recriminations, emotional outbursts. My calm professionalism was clearly unnerving him. You have until the end of the day to return any company property, Jack informed him. After that, we'll have no choice but to pursue all available legal remedies. I want my personal belongings from my office, David demanded. They'll be packed and delivered to your attorney, I replied. Security protocols don't allow terminated employees to return to work areas. His face flushed with humiliation. Terminated employee? Is that what I am to you now? After 15 years of marriage? After building this company together? I felt a crack in my composure at the mention of our marriage, but steeled myself. You made your choice, David. When you transferred our money to buy a house for your girlfriend, when you tried to steal company assets, when you betrayed every promise you ever made to me and to this company. For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened once more. Enjoy your victory, Elizabeth. It won't last. As security escorted him from the room, I remained seated, breathing deeply to maintain my composure. Jack placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. You did well, he said quietly. The hard part is over. But we both knew that wasn't true. The hard part, rebuilding the company without its charismatic founder, explaining the transition to employees and clients, handling the inevitable press inquiries, and navigating the personal devastation of my failed marriage, was just beginning. The employee meeting is in 30 minutes, Jack reminded me gently. Do you need a moment? I shook my head, gathering my materials. No, let's go. From the lobby security feed, I watched David return to his car with a security escort to retrieve his laptop. Amber hovered uncertainly nearby, her expression suggesting she was realizing that her future might not include the luxurious lifestyle David had promised. When they drove away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders and settle more firmly around my heart. The executive team assembled quickly in the boardroom, their expressions a mixture of confusion and concern. Sam Wilson, our CTO, Miranda Chen, our Chief Marketing Officer, James Rodriguez, our Chief Operations Officer, and Priya Patel, our newly promoted Chief Financial Officer, all trusted colleagues who had no idea their world was about to shift dramatically. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," I began, standing at the head of the table. "I have difficult news to share. As of this morning, David Porter is no longer CEO of Breakthrough Solutions." The shock was immediate and visible. Sam, who had worked with David since our garage startup days, actually stood up in surprise. "What? Why? What happened?" "The board has terminated his employment for cause," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "Evidence came to light of financial misconduct and attempted theft of company intellectual property." "This can't be right," Miranda said, shaking her head. "David wouldn't—" "I understand this is shocking," I interrupted gently, "but the evidence is conclusive and the board's decision unanimous." I nodded to Jack, who distributed folders to each executive. "These contain the key information you need to know. Many details must remain confidential due to ongoing legal matters, but this will help you understand the situation." As they reviewed the documents, carefully redacted to focus on the corporate issues without revealing the personal aspects, the room fell silent. "The unauthorized server access was yesterday?" Sam asked, looking up from the technical logs. "These are from our most secure repositories." "Yes," I confirmed. "Fortunately, our security protocols prevented the transfer." Priya was reviewing the financial documentation, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "These consulting payments, they should have come directly to the company. This is embezzlement." "The board has reached the same conclusion," Jack confirmed. James, always practical, looked up from his folder. "What happens now? Who's in charge?" "The board has appointed me interim CEO while a search committee evaluates candidates for the permanent position," I explained. "Our immediate priority is stability, reassuring our clients, supporting our employees, and maintaining our operational excellence." "There will be questions," Miranda said, her marketing mind already considering the public relations challenges. "From employees, clients, the industry, the press." "We've prepared statements for each audience," I assured her. "The messaging is straightforward. Leadership change due to governance concerns, strong succession plan in place, no impact on operations or client deliverables." "And if people ask about personal matters?" Miranda asked hesitantly, her eyes meeting mine with uncomfortable knowledge. Of course, they'd all seen Amber in the lobby. Rumors would already be circulating. "We keep everything professional," I said firmly. "David's personal life is not relevant to the business decision made today. If asked directly, the response is simply that we don't comment on the personal lives of current or former employees." They nodded, though I could see the questions in their eyes. Questions they were too professional or too kind to ask. "We have an all-hands meeting in 10 minutes, I continued. "I expect your full support in maintaining calm and focus among the team. After that, we'll begin reaching out to our key clients personally. Jack has prepared a contact schedule prioritizing our largest accounts." As the executives gathered their materials, preparing to face our 200 employees, Sam lingered behind. "Elizabeth," he said quietly once we were alone, "I've known you and David since the beginning. Whatever happened, I'm sorry you're going through this." The simple kindness nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. "Thank you, Sam. That means a lot." He nodded awkwardly, then added, "For what it's worth, you've always been the real backbone of this company. We'll get through this." Standing before our assembled employees minutes later, I drew strength from Sam's words. As I explained the leadership transition, keeping the details professional, the tone confident, and my personal feelings carefully contained, I could see the shock and confusion ripple through the crowd. Change is never easy, I concluded, especially unexpected change. But the strength of Breakthrough Solutions has never been in any individual. It's in our collective talent, our shared mission, and our unwavering commitment to excellence. That hasn't changed, and it won't change. I'm counting on each of you to help us navigate this transition with professionalism and focus. As I stepped away from the podium, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass wall of the auditorium. I looked steady, composed, in control. Everything I needed my employees to see. No one would guess that beneath the surface I was still, reeling from the discovery that the man I'd built a life with had been planning to abandon me, stealing our shared resources and company assets in the process. The morning's confrontation with David played on repeat in my mind. His final words echoed ominously, "Enjoy your victory, Elizabeth. It won't last." I knew David well enough to recognize a threat when I heard one. This wasn't over. He still owned 49% of the company. He still had connections throughout the industry. And now, he had nothing left to lose. As the employees filed out, Robert approached with an update. "All of Mr. Porter's access has been revoked from our systems. Digital Forensics is already analyzing his devices for any additional attempt at data theft." I nodded my approval. "And our external monitoring? In place. We're tracking all his known accounts and contact points for any attempt to reach clients or partners." "Good. Double the security detail at all offices for the next week and make sure our remote employees are using the enhanced authentication protocols." I checked my watch. "What about the house?" "The security team reports that Mr. Porter and Ms. Sullivan arrived at your residence approximately 20 minutes ago. They appear to be removing personal items. Despite everything, the idea of David bringing his mistress into our home sent a fresh wave of pain through me. Make sure they're only taking what's permitted under the court order. Personal clothing and effects only. Nothing purchased with company funds. Nothing of significant value without documentation." Robert hesitated. "Should we have someone inside? Monitoring? No," I decided after a moment. "Let them take what they came for. Document everything, but don't interfere unless they violate the order." As Robert left to relay the instructions, Jack approached with a concerned expression. "We've just received word that David's attorney has filed an emergency motion challenging his termination. They're requesting a temporary restraining order to reinstate his access and position pending a full hearing." "On what grounds?" I asked, though I wasn't surprised. David always counterattacked when cornered. "They're claiming the board acted without proper authority and that the evidence against him was obtained improperly." Jack's expression was grim. "And Elizabeth, they're making it personal. The filing specifically alleges that you manipulated the board as retaliation for marital problems. So much for keeping our personal lives private. David had taken the battle public, just as I'd feared he might. When is the hearing?" "Tomorrow morning, Judge Harriman's court." I nodded, recognizing the name of a notoriously unpredictable judge. "We'll be ready." As I walked back to my office, David's former office, with its sweeping views of the bay, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. I had won the first round, protecting the company from David's attempted theft and removing him from power, but David's parting words hadn't been empty bravado. The war was just beginning. The courthouse steps were already crowded with reporters when I arrived the next morning. Word had leaked, deliberately I suspected, about the emergency hearing. David had always understood the power of public perception. "Mrs. Porter, is it true you fired your husband out of jealousy?" "Elizabeth, did you use your position to take revenge on David Porter?" I ignored the shouted questions, keeping my eyes forward as Jack and Susan flanked me on either side, creating a protective barrier. Robert's security team had cleared a path through the media scrum, but they couldn't silence the questions that cut too close to painful truths. "Remember," Susan murmured as we approached the courthouse doors. "Judge Harriman responds to confidence and clarity. David's team will try to muddy the waters with emotional arguments. We need to keep everything focused on corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility." Inside the austere marble hallway, we spotted David immediately. He stood with his attorney, Gregory Walsh, a flamboyant litigator known for his aggressive tactics and media savvy. Beside them, looking uncomfortable in a conservatively tailored suit that couldn't quite disguise her youth, stood Amber Sullivan. Bringing her was a calculated move, Jack observed quietly. He wants to provoke an emotional reaction from you. It won't work, I replied, though seeing them together in this context sent a fresh wave of pain through me. Amber looked up, caught my eye, then quickly looked away, her discomfort visible even from a distance. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in an unflattering pallor. Judge Harriman, a heavy-set man with thinning gray hair and perpetually narrowed eyes, studied the room as we settled into our respective places. "Counsel," he said once the formalities were complete, "I've reviewed the emergency motion and response. Mr. Walsh, you're asking this court to issue a temporary restraining order reinstating your client pending a full hearing. On what basis? Should I overturn what appears to be a properly executed board decision?" Walsh rose smoothly, buttoning his expensive suit jacket with practiced ease. "Your Honor, this case represents a shocking abuse of corporate governance. My client, David Porter, is the founder and public face of Breakthrough Solutions. He has been summarily removed from the company he built based on allegations manufactured by his wife in retaliation for personal grievances." I maintained my neutral expression as Walsh continued his theatrical presentation, painting David as the visionary genius being persecuted by his vindictive spouse. It was a masterful performance, designed to appeal to the judge's well-known dislike of family disputes spilling into corporate governance. The evidence against my client was gathered secretly, without due process, and presented to the board in a carefully orchestrated ambush. Walsh concluded, "We simply ask that Mr. Porter be reinstated while a full and fair investigation is conducted by neutral parties." Judge Harriman nodded thoughtfully, then turned to our table. "Ms. Walton?" Susan rose with calm confidence. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Breakthrough Solutions Board of Directors voted unanimously to terminate David Porter's employment after reviewing conclusive evidence of financial misconduct and attempted theft of intellectual property." She held up a binder. "We have provided the court with the complete evidence package presented to the board, including server logs documenting Mr. Porter's attempt to transfer proprietary code to unsecured external servers, financial records showing his diversion of company funds to personal accounts, and communications revealing his intent to misappropriate company assets." The judge frowned. "Ms. Walton, Mr. Walsh suggests these allegations arose suspiciously close to marital problems between Mr. Porter and Mrs. Porter." "The timing is hardly suspicious, Your Honor," Susan replied smoothly. "The discovery of Mr. Porter's misconduct and his marital infidelity occurred simultaneously because they were part of the same scheme. In preparing to leave both his marriage and his company, Mr. Porter attempted to extract maximum financial benefit through improper and potentially illegal means." Walsh was on his feet immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is injecting personal matters into what should be a corporate governance issue." "With respect," Susan countered, "Mr. Walsh introduced the personal element by suggesting Mrs. Porter's actions were motivated by marital grievances. We're simply providing context for the timing, which is directly relevant to the corporate malfeasance at issue." Judge Harriman considered this, then nodded. "I'll allow it, but let's stay focused on the corporate issues. This isn't divorce court." For the next hour, both sides presented arguments about board authority, evidence collection, and corporate governance. Throughout it all, I felt David's gaze fixed on me, but I refused to meet his eyes. Instead, I focused on the documents before me, providing notes to Susan when needed. "Your Honor," Walsh said, launching a new line of attack, "we haven't addressed the fundamental conflict of interest here. Mrs. Porter used her majority shareholder position to orchestrate her husband's removal for personal reasons. She's now installed herself as interim CEO, effectively seizing control of the company in a corporate coup. Judge Harriman looked to our table. Mrs. Porter is serving as interim CEO? Susan nodded. By board appointment, yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Porter has been the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Strategy Officer since the company's founding. She is the logical choice to provide stability during this transition. And she just happens to be the spurned wife of the man she's replaced, Walsh added with theatrical timing. Before Susan could respond, Judge Harriman raised his hand. I think I've heard enough from counsel. Mrs. Porter, please approach the bench. Surprised, I exchanged glances with Susan, who nodded encouragingly. As I approached the judge's bench, David was similarly summoned forward. Standing just feet apart for the first time since our confrontation in the restaurant, I could smell his familiar cologne, could see the slight loosening of his tie, a tell that he was feeling stressed despite his confident demeanor. Mrs. Porter. Mr. Porter, Judge Harriman said, his voice lowered so only we could hear. I've been on the bench for 27 years. I've seen enough corporate disputes and enough divorces to recognize when they're colliding. Whatever is happening in your marriage is not my concern, but the stability of a publicly traded company with hundreds of employees most certainly is. He fixed us both with a stern gaze. Can either of you give me a compelling reason why I shouldn't appoint an independent executive to run this company temporarily while these matters are sorted out properly? David seized the opportunity immediately. Your Honor, I've been the face of Breakthrough Solutions since its founding. Our clients, partners, and investors associate the company with me. Removing me creates massive instability. Your Honor, I interrupted calmly. Breakthrough Solutions has a robust executive team and clear succession protocols. The board's unanimous decision demonstrates confidence in the current leadership. Introducing an unknown third party would create far more disruption than maintaining the current structure. And what about the obvious conflict of interest, Mrs. Porter? The judge pressed. You are in the midst of what appears to be a contentious personal situation with Mr. Porter while simultaneously running the company he founded. With respect, Your Honor, I co-founded Breakthrough Solutions. The company's success has always been the result of a talented team, not any single individual. As for conflicts of interest, the board was fully informed of the personal situation before making its decision about corporate leadership. Judge Harriman studied us both for a long moment, then dismissed us back to our tables. The courtroom waited in tense silence as he reviewed his notes, occasionally frowning in concentration. Finally, he looked up. I am denying the motion for emergency reinstatement, he announced. The evidence of corporate malfeasance is sufficient to support the board's decision to terminate Mr. Porter's employment. David stiffened beside his attorney as Walsh scribbled furious notes. I maintained my neutral expression, though relief washed through me. However, the judge continued, I am troubled by the obvious entanglement of personal and professional matters in this case. I am ordering Breakthrough Solutions Board to engage an independent corporate governance expert to review all decisions related to Mr. Porter's termination and Mrs. Porter's appointment. This review must be completed within 30 days, with findings submitted to this court. He fixed me with a stern look. Mrs. Porter may continue as interim CEO during this period, but must recuse herself from any decisions directly related to Mr. Porter's termination, his equity stake, or any settlement negotiations between the parties. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough for now. As the judge continued outlining his requirements for the governance review, I noticed Amber shifting uncomfortably in her seat, clearly regretting her role in this public spectacle. David, meanwhile, was whispering intensely to Walsh, his expression thunderous. Outside the courtroom, the press had somehow multiplied. Jack quickly steered us toward a private exit while Robert's team created a diversion at the main doors. As we slipped into the waiting car, I finally allowed myself to exhale. That went as well as could be expected, Susan said, reviewing her notes. The governance review is actually a blessing in disguise. It will create an additional layer of validation for the board's decisions. David won't stop. I said, watching the courthouse recede in the rear window. This was just the opening move. Agreed, Jack replied grimly. Walsh is already signaling a shareholder derivative suit. With David owning 49%, he has standing to cause significant disruption. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Major client asking questions. Porter reached out to them directly. He's going after the clients, I said, showing them the message. Just as I expected. We need to accelerate our outreach plan, Jack agreed. Starting with the Thompson account, they represent 15% of our annual revenue. I'll handle Thompson personally, I decided. Sam can take Westridge, and James should contact the Singapore group immediately. As we strategized our client retention plan, another text came through. This one from our head of human resources. D. Porter emailed all staff claiming wrongful termination and promising to restore proper leadership soon. Employees confused and concerned. He's trying to create internal chaos, Susan observed. Classic scorched earth tactic, I thought for a moment. Schedule an all-hands meeting for 3 p.m. We need to address this directly, acknowledge the uncertainty, and provide clear information about the path forward, and have IT block David's email domain from our servers. Back at headquarters, crisis management consumed the rest of the day. By late afternoon, I had personally spoken with our 5 largest clients, authorized a company-wide email clarifying the leadership situation, and met with nervous department heads to reassure them about the company's stability. Through it all, a steady stream of updates from Robert's security team tracked David's movements. He'd met with 3 former breakthrough executives who had left the company years earlier. He'd contacted 2 of our competitors. He'd had lunch with a tech journalist known for breaking stories about corporate scandals. He's building a coalition, I told Jack during a brief strategy session. Gathering allies and planning a public relations offensive. The PR team is preparing responses to likely allegations, Jack assured me. But we need to be ready for him. To make this very personal. It already is personal, I replied quietly. He's fighting for his reputation, his legacy, and his financial future. There's nothing more personal than that. My phone buzzed again. Robert with an urgent update. D. Porter accessing personal storage unit. Contains company archives from pre-cloud era. I froze, suddenly remembering the storage facility where we'd kept our earliest company records. Our rapid growth, some of those historical documents had never been properly digitized or secured. He's looking for leverage, I realized. Early contracts, preliminary patent applications, anything that might give him a claim independent of the current corporate structure. Jack immediately began typing on his tablet. I'll have legal prepare for potential IP challenges based on historical documentation. What specifically might he find there? I closed my eyes, thinking back to our garage startup days. Notebooks, with original code concepts, early investor pitch decks, maybe prototype specifications that predate our formal patent filings. By the time I finished the all-hands meeting, facing hundreds of concerned faces with as much confidence and transparency as I could muster, Robert had confirmed our fears. David had removed multiple boxes from the storage facility and taken them to a temporary office he'd apparently rented in Palo Alto. He's building a case for independent creation, Jack said when I shared this update. Trying to establish that key intellectual property was his personal work, not work for hire under company auspices. Will that strategy work? I asked. It's thin but not implausible, Jack admitted. Early-stage startups often have murky IP ownership, especially between co-founders. If he can create enough doubt about foundational technologies, he could potentially force a settlement that leaves him with rights to certain patents or processes. The thought of David carving off pieces of our company's intellectual property, the innovations we'd built together, made my stomach turn. Options? We file for a preservation order immediately, claiming those materials are company property. At minimum, that prevents him from selectively destroying anything that doesn't support his narrative. I nodded my approval, and Jack stepped out to set the legal process in motion. Alone in the CEO's office, David's office until yesterday, and now temporarily mine, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine emotion. The weight of the past 48 hours crashed down as I stared out at the bay, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the water. My marriage was over. The company I'd built was under siege from the person I'd built it with. My personal humiliation was becoming public fodder. And somewhere in Palo Alto, the man I'd loved for 15 years was in a rented office with a young girlfriend, plotting to dismantle everything I'd worked for. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Miranda, our chief marketing officer, entered hesitantly. "Sorry to disturb you, Elizabeth, but I thought you should see this immediately." She placed a tablet on the desk, open to a tech industry blog. The headline made my blood run cold. Breakdown at Breakthrough. CEO claims wife staged corporate cope after marriage troubles. The article featured quotes from sources close to David Porter, claiming I had used the discovery of his relationship. With Amber as a pretext to seize control of the company I'd always resented him leading. It painted me as the vindictive wife, David as the visionary being punished for personal choices, and the board as unwitting pawns in a matrimonial power struggle. "It's already been picked up by 3 major tech publications," Miranda said apologetically. "Our PR team is drafting responses, but the narrative is already forming," I finished for her. David as the sympathetic genius, me as the vengeful wife. Miranda shifted uncomfortably. "There's more. David has apparently scheduled interviews with Business Insider and TechCrunch for tomorrow, and..." She hesitated. "What is it?" "Amber Sullivan has been approached about a potential tell-all about her relationship with David and the company culture at Breakthrough. Our sources say she's considering it." That was unexpected. I'd assumed Amber was fully aligned with David's interests, but her discomfort in court suggested possible fractures in their united front. "Thank you, Miranda," I said, taking a deep breath. "Have the PR team prepare a simple statement reiterating that Mr. Porter was terminated for documented financial misconduct and attempted intellectual property theft. We won't address personal matters or engage in character debates." After Miranda left, I found myself staring at the blog article again, at the professional photo of David looking confident and slightly wounded, a visual reinforcement of the narrative he was crafting. My phone buzzed with texts from concerned friends who had seen the stories. Even my mother called, worried about the public spectacle unfolding. "I'm fine, Mom," I assured her, though we both knew it was a lie. "This will pass." "You should come stay with me for a few days," she suggested. "Get away from the publicity." "I can't. The company needs visible leadership right now." After reassuring her, I hung up and turned back to the mounting crisis. Robert's security team reported that David had now contacted 6 more clients. 2 board members called with concerns about the media narrative. The governance expert appointed by Judge Harriman requested an initial meeting for the following morning. By 8 p.m., I was exhausted but still working through the crisis response strategy with Jack, Susan, and our executive team. That's when Martin Chen called with the news I'd been dreading. "The Thompson account is wavering," he said without preamble. David convinced Ryan Thompson to hear his side over dinner tonight. They're meeting now at the Battery. The Thompson account represented 15% of our annual revenue. Losing them would not only hurt financially, but would likely trigger a cascade of client departures. "I need to be there," I said immediately. "Elizabeth, that's exactly what David wants," Jack cautioned. "A public confrontation that reinforces his narrative about personal conflicts affecting business." "If I don't go, we lose Thompson," I replied, already gathering my things. "David knows Ryan values personal relationships above all else in business. If Ryan only hears David's version..." No one argued further. Within 20 minutes, I was in a car headed to the Battery, an exclusive private club in downtown San Francisco, where the city's tech elite conducted their most sensitive business. Conversations? My membership had been sponsored by Ryan Thompson himself 3 years earlier, after we'd helped his company through a difficult technical transition. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Porter, welcome. Your husband is already here, with Mr. Thompson in the library lounge." "Thank you, Michael," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'll join them." The library lounge was designed for discreet conversations, low lighting, well-spaced seating areas, sound-dampening architectural features. I spotted them immediately. David and Ryan in a corner arrangement of leather chairs, tumblers of expensive scotch between them. David was leaning forward intently, while Ryan nodded with a concerned expression. Both men looked up as I approached. Ryan seemed startled and slightly embarrassed. David's expression flickered between surprise and calculation. "Elizabeth?" Ryan said, standing awkwardly. "I didn't expect—" "I apologize for interrupting," I said, maintaining professional composure. "But when I heard you were concerned about the transition at Breakthrough, I wanted to speak with you personally." "Please join us," Ryan offered, gesturing to an empty chair. The discomfort was palpable as I sat down, completing a triangle of tension. Ryan was just expressing concern about continuity for his projects, David said smoothly. "I was explaining that the current situation is temporary." "By situation, I assume you mean your termination for financial misconduct and attempted theft of intellectual property?" I asked, my voice level despite the hammering of my heart. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, whatever's happening between you two personally isn't my concern. I just need to know my company's 8-figure investment in Breakthrough's logistics platform is secure." "That's precisely why I'm here," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "The transition in leadership will have zero impact on your implementation schedule or support structure. Your project team remains unchanged, and I've personally reviewed the milestone targets for the next 6 months." "Elizabeth has always been excellent with details," David interjected, his tone subtly dismissive. "But Ryan, we both know Breakthrough's value proposition has always been about visionary direction and innovation. The roadmap we discussed for expanding your platform's capabilities will proceed exactly as planned," I finished firmly. "Every aspect of that roadmap has been documented, approved by the technology team, and incorporated into our development schedule." Ryan looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Look, I value my relationship with both of you. David's vision is what convinced me to partner with Breakthrough in the first place. But Elizabeth, your team's execution has been flawless. Which is why you shouldn't make any hasty decisions," I said. "Give us 30 days to demonstrate that the transition will not affect your service level or innovation pipeline. If at that point you have any concerns, we'll discuss appropriate accommodations." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He knew I'd made a reasonable proposal that Ryan would find difficult to refuse. "30 days seems fair," Ryan acknowledged after a moment. "But I need complete transparency about the leadership structure and any potential disruptions." "Absolutely," I agreed. "I'll have our account team schedule weekly executive updates, and I'll personally participate in the first and last meetings." David attempted to regain control of the conversation, but his position had been undermined. When Ryan excused himself briefly to take a call, David turned to me with cold fury in his eyes. "Enjoy playing CEO while you can," he said, his voice low. "It won't last. The board will realize they need me once clients start leaving and innovation stalls." "Is that your strategy?" I asked, genuinely curious despite my anger. "Sabotage the company we built together just to spite me?" "This isn't about spite," he replied. "It's about correcting a mistake. You're not equipped to lead Breakthrough, Elizabeth. You never were. That's why our arrangement worked. I provided the vision and leadership. You handled the details. And the money," I added. "Don't forget how your vision and leadership was funded, with capital I raised, relationships I built, and structures I created. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. The company needs me. No, David. You need the company. Without it, who are you? Just another middle-aged tech executive who left his wife for a younger woman. Hardly original. His expression hardened just as Ryan returned. I smiled pleasantly, as though we'd been discussing the weather instead of the ruins of our personal and professional lives. By the time I left the Battery an hour later, Ryan Thompson had committed to maintaining his company's relationship with Breakthrough Solutions for at least the 30-day evaluation period. It wasn't a permanent victory, but it bought precious time. In the car heading back to headquarters, I received a text from an unknown number. Need to talk, not what I signed up for. Amber. I stared at the message, considering the implications. Amber Sullivan, the woman David had betrayed me for, the catalyst for this entire catastrophe, was reaching out independently. Was it a trap set by David? A genuine break in their united front? A play for financial advantage? Whatever her motive, Amber Sullivan had just introduced a new wild card into an already unpredictable situation. The question was whether meeting with her would be a strategic error or the key to finally understanding the full scope of David's betrayal. As headquarters came into view, its windows glowing in the evening darkness, I made my decision and typed a response. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Send. Your location in the morning. Whether ally or adversary, Amber Sullivan might hold pieces of the puzzle I didn't even know were missing. Insights into David's plans that could prove crucial in the war for control of Breakthrough Solutions, the company that had become the battlefield for the remnants of my shattered marriage. The coffee shop Amber had chosen was deliberately public, a busy, trendy place in Hayes Valley where San Francisco's tech workers gathered between meetings. Strategic, I thought as I spotted her in a corner booth. She wanted witnesses to ensure our meeting remained civil. Amber looked different than she had in court, younger without the severe suit, more vulnerable in casual clothes with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She fidgeted with her phone as I approached, clearly nervous. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice softer than I'd expected. I slid into the booth opposite her, keeping my expression neutral. Your message indicated it was important. Amber glanced around as if checking for familiar faces before leaning forward. David doesn't know I'm here. He can't know. Interesting. I understand, I replied carefully. Whatever you share stays between us. She seemed to study me for a moment, perhaps searching for signs of the vengeful wife David had undoubtedly described. Finding none, she reached into her bag and withdrew a small USB drive. There are things you need to know, she said, sliding it across the table. Things I didn't understand until recently. I looked at the small device without touching it. What's on it? Evidence, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Emails, financial records, plans David made months ago, not just to leave you, but to take control of Breakthrough completely. Why are you giving me this? I asked, still not touching the drive. Amber's eyes dropped to her coffee cup. I thought... She paused, gathering herself. I thought I was special. That we had something real. I didn't know I was just part of a bigger plan. The pain in her voice was familiar, the realization that David Porter's charm concealed calculation. When did you find out? I asked. 3 days ago, after the court hearing. Her fingers tightened around her cup. He was furious about losing, started drinking. That's when he showed me the contingency plan, as he called it. It wasn't just about us being together. It was about using me to create grounds for divorcing you while he dismantled your company. From the inside. I finally picked up the USB drive, tucking it into my pocket. Tell me about this contingency plan. He created a parallel company structure, she explained. Shell companies registered in my name, holding key patents he planned to transfer out of Breakthrough. He told me it was for tax purposes. She laughed bitterly. I'm an actress with 3 commercials and a student loan. What do I know about corporate tax strategies? Did you sign documents for these companies? She nodded miserably. Several. He said they were formalities, that I wouldn't have any real responsibilities. That explained some of the puzzling gaps in our forensic accounting investigation. Assets. That seemed to vanish rather than transfer. There's more, Amber continued. He's meeting with Kieran Walsh tomorrow. The name hit me like a physical blow. Kieran Walsh was CEO of our largest competitor, Nexus Logistics. Any collaboration between David and Nexus could devastate Breakthrough's market position. Thank you for telling me this, I said, reassessing the young woman across from me. But I have to ask, why? Why risk his anger by warning me? Amber looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. Because he lied to me too. Because I'm not just some stupid girl he can use and discard. And because... She hesitated. Because you didn't deserve what he did to you. Either of us. As I left the coffee shop 20 minutes later, I felt strangely hollow. The knowledge that David's betrayal had been even more calculated than I'd imagined should have angered me, but instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity. This wasn't about love or passion or midlife crisis. It was about power, control, and ambition, things I understood far better than matters of the heart. Back at headquarters, I convened an emergency meeting with Jack, Susan, and Robert. The contents of Amber's USB drive proved more valuable than we could have anticipated. Detailed documentation of David's scheme to hollow out Breakthrough's intellectual property while maintaining its client relationships and market valuation. This is corporate espionage, Jack said, reviewing the emails between David and various accomplices. He's been planning this for at least 8 months. The meeting with Kieran Walsh is scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow at Nexus headquarters, Robert confirmed, checking his sources. Our intelligence suggests they're discussing a potential merger of assets, likely code for transferring the patents held in Miss Sullivan's shell companies. Susan was already drafting legal documents. We need emergency injunctions against all these entities immediately, and we should alert the SEC. These emails constitute clear evidence of securities fraud. I stared at the organizational chart we'd created on the conference room whiteboard, mapping David's shadow corporate structure. He created all of this while sleeping next to me every night, I said quietly. While attending strategy meetings, while celebrating company milestones. Jack placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. Elizabeth, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about protecting the company, our employees, and our shareholders. He was right. Personal betrayal had to take a back seat to corporate responsibility. Proceed with the injunctions, I instructed Susan. Robert, I want surveillance on that meeting tomorrow. Jack, prepare a briefing for the board. They need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. As they left to execute their tasks, I remained alone in the conference room, studying the web of deception David had constructed. One question kept returning. How would he react when this final scheme collapsed? David Porter was not a man accustomed to losing, and he'd now lost his marriage, his position, and soon, his shadow companies. My phone buzzed with a text from Amber. He knows. Don't know how. He's furious. Be careful. I forwarded the message to Robert immediately, then called security to escort me home. If David had discovered Amber's betrayal, his carefully constructed plans were unraveling faster than anticipated. That made him unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The security team swept my house before allowing me inside, confirming no one had entered since the previous day. As an additional precaution, Robert assigned 2 guards to remain outside overnight. The measures seemed excessive until my phone rang just after midnight. Elizabeth. David's voice was icily controlled, but I could hear the rage simmering beneath. I underestimated you. I'm hanging up now, I replied calmly. Any communication should go through our attorneys. Did you really think that little actress would outsmart me? He continued as if I hadn't spoken. That I wouldn't have contingencies for my contingencies. Goodbye, David, I said, moving to end the call. The board meeting tomorrow, he said quickly. You might want to reconsider your presentation. That stopped me. What are you talking about? His laugh was cold. You'll see. Sleep well, Elizabeth. Tomorrow's going to be quite memorable. The line went dead before I could respond. I immediately called Jack and Robert, relaying the conversation and David's cryptic warning about the board meeting. Neither had concrete insights, but both promised to review security measures and investigate possible threats. Sleep eluded me entirely. By dawn, I was in my home office, reviewing every aspect of our strategy, searching for vulnerabilities David might exploit. Nothing seemed immediately obvious, yet his confidence suggested he still believed he held a winning card. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., a special session to review the governance experts' preliminary findings and discuss the legal actions against David's shadow companies. I arrived at headquarters unusually early, walking the empty corridors as the morning sun cast long shadows through the glass walls. Martin Chen called as I was reviewing my presentation notes. Elizabeth, I've just received a most unusual email from David. It contains serious allegations that I believe the board needs to address before proceeding with today's agenda. My stomach tightened. What allegations? Martin hesitated. He claims to have evidence that you engaged in systematic financial manipulation over several years. Essentially, that you've been embezzling from the company while positioning him to take the fall if discovered. The absurdity of the claim would have been laughable if it weren't so potentially damaging. That's completely false, I replied, and obviously a desperate attempt to deflect from his own documented misconduct. I believe you, Martin assured. Me. But he sent similar emails to all board members, along with what appear to be financial records showing irregular transactions authorized under your credentials. The board will need to address these claims before proceeding. By the time the board convened at 2 p.m., the tension was palpable. Each member had received David's allegations, and despite their professional demeanor, uncertainty hung in the air. Worse, David himself had somehow secured an invitation to present his evidence in person. He entered the boardroom looking immaculate and confident, the consummate executive prepared to deliver difficult news. Only I could see the slight flush of triumph in his cheeks as our eyes briefly met. Members of the board, he began with practiced solemnity. I take no pleasure in presenting this information. For years, I trusted Elizabeth completely with our company's financial operations. That trust, it seems, was misplaced. He distributed folders containing transaction records, account statements, and authorization logs, all seemingly documenting a pattern of financial irregularities under my approval. As you can see, he continued, approximately $4.3 million has been diverted through a series of carefully disguised transactions over the past 3 years, all authorized using Elizabeth's credentials, all carefully timed to avoid standard auditing detection. The board members reviewed the documents with increasing concern. Martin looked at me with questioning eyes. Elizabeth? I maintained my composure, though my heart raced. The documents looked convincing, detailed, professional, consistent with our internal systems. Yet, I knew with absolute certainty they were fabricated. These records are forgeries, I stated firmly. Sophisticated ones, but forgeries nonetheless. I welcome a complete forensic investigation of our financial systems, which will confirm that these transactions never occurred. David's smile was almost pitying. The transactions were deliberately structured to be difficult to trace through standard forensic methods. That was the point, Elizabeth. You created a perfect system of deniability. For a terrible moment, I could see doubt flickering across the board members' faces. David had crafted a masterful deception, using my own reputation for financial expertise against me. If I could create sophisticated financial structures, surely I could have created undetectable embezzlement schemes. Then a gentle knock at the boardroom door broke the tension. Jack entered, followed by a man I didn't recognize carrying a laptop. "I apologize for the interruption," Jack said smoothly, "but I believe Mr. Jerome has information directly relevant to the current discussion." David's expression flickered with uncertainty as the stranger set up his computer at the head of the table. "Thomas Jerome, digital forensics specialist," the man introduced himself. "I've been analyzing Breakthrough's server access logs as part of the governance review ordered by Judge Harriman." Martin gestured for him to continue. "These financial records," Jerome said, gesturing to the folders David had distributed, "were created last night between 11:42 p.m. and 3:17 a.m. They were generated using admin credentials registered to David Porter's home IP address." The board collectively turned to stare at David, whose composure visibly cracked. "That's impossible," he protested. "Those records came directly from our financial database." Jerome shook his head. "The metadata signature is conclusive. These documents were created using templates stolen from the company's secure server, but the content has been manipulated. Furthermore, the access logs show Mr. Porter attempting to plant these falsified records in the company's financial archive early this morning, but he was prevented by security protocols implemented last week." David's face had drained of color. This was clearly not the contingency he had planned for. "Mr. Porter," Martin said gravely, "did you falsify evidence in an attempt to frame Mrs. Porter for financial crimes?" David's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. Finding none, his expression hardened. "You don't understand what she's done," he said bitterly. "She's systematically undermined me for years, controlled everything from the shadows while I was the public face-taking." "All the risks." "That's not an answer to the question," Martin pressed. "Yes, I created the records," David finally admitted, "but they represent real patterns of behavior. Elizabeth has always manipulated the company's finances to maintain her control. I just couldn't prove it through conventional means." The board's collective disappointment was palpable. Even those who had worked closely with David for years could no longer deny the extent of his deception. "I think we've heard enough," Martin concluded. "Mr. Porter, the board will be pursuing all available legal remedies for this attempted fraud. I suggest you contact your attorney immediately." As security escorted David from the boardroom, his eyes locked with mine one final time. In them, I saw not the man I had loved for 15 years, but a stranger consumed by ambition and resentment. 3. Weeks later, I stood at the windows of the CEO's office, my office now, by official board appointment, watching the autumn fog roll across San Francisco Bay. The past month had brought seismic changes. David faced multiple federal charges for fraud, securities violations, and attempted corporate espionage. His shadow, companies had been dissolved, the assets recovered. Amber Sullivan had accepted immunity in exchange for her full cooperation with investigators. The company had stabilized more quickly than anyone expected. Our clients, reassured by transparent communication and uninterrupted service, had largely remained loyal. The employees, relieved to understand the full story, had rallied around the new leadership team. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Final divorce settlement approved by judge. All financial terms as we requested. It's officially over." I set the phone down, feeling a complex mix of sadness and relief. The marriage that had defined 15 years of my life was legally dissolved. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed both my personal and professional worlds had been addressed through courts and contracts. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Priya, our CFO, entered with the quarterly financial projections. "The numbers look strong," she reported. "Client retention at 93%. New account acquisition actually up 12% from last quarter." "The Thompson account?" I asked. "Renewed for 3 years with expanded services," she confirmed with a small smile. As we reviewed the projections, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine optimism. Breakthrough Solutions hadn't just survived David's betrayal, it was thriving without him. Later that evening, as I finally cleared the last of David's personal items from my home, I found a photograph tucked in an old book. It showed us on the day we'd secured our first major client standing in front of our garage office with exhausted but triumphant smiles. Two partners who believed they were building something lasting together. I didn't feel hatred looking at his younger face, or even anger anymore. Just a profound sadness for what had been lost, and clarity about what had never truly existed. David had always seen me as a means to his ambitions, not a partner in them. As I placed the photograph in a box destined for storage, my phone rang with a call from Martin Chen. "Elizabeth, I wanted to deliver the news personally. The board has voted unanimously to make your CEO appointment permanent. The search committee recommended you above all external candidates." "Thank you, Martin," I replied, genuinely moved by the vote of confidence. "I accept." After we discussed the details, I walked through my quiet house to the back garden. The roses I'd planted years ago were blooming in the soft evening light, surviving despite seasons of neglect while I'd focused on building our company. In the end, David hadn't just forgotten who controlled the business legally. He'd forgotten something more fundamental: that true strength comes not from charisma or cunning, but from creating genuine value and building honest relationships. He had mistaken my preference for working behind the scenes as weakness, my attention to detail as limitation. His betrayal had forced me to step into the spotlight I'd long avoided, to embrace leadership roles I'd previously surrendered to him. In trying to destroy what we'd built together, he had inadvertently revealed a strength in me I hadn't fully recognized myself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A media interview I'd finally agreed to, negotiations with potential European partners, strategic decisions about our product roadmap. The work of leading, not from the shadows, but from the front. As darkness fell over San Francisco, I sent one final email before closing my laptop for the night. A company-wide announcement of my permanent appointment as CEO, ending with a simple philosophy that would guide us forward. Success isn't built on brilliant deceptions or clever betrayals. It's built on creating genuine value, maintaining integrity when tested, and remembering that how we achieve matters as much as what we achieve. David had forgotten who had control of the business, but more importantly, he had forgotten that trust, once broken, is the one asset no financial scheme or corporate maneuver can ever recover. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.